So why did you grow up in the Philippines? When did you come to faith, and what made you want to go into really global, I mean, theology? That's what you're
Yeah,
talking about, global theology.
yeah,
So tell us a bit
yeah.
about that.
Yeah, so my parents are both like I think seventh generation Texans and Houstonians. They grew up in that part of the country and very rooted there. Nominally Christian families, and in the 70s, actually partly influenced by the Jesus People movement and some other things that were happening in Christian circles at that time. They both kind of had an evangelical conversion
Mm.
and a call to missions separately, and then found each other and headed, down the pipeline as part of a big missions boom that was happening in the 80s. And they were sent to the southern Philippines. The Philippines has about 7,000 islands. The second largest, I think that's right, yeah, is Mindanao, which is the
Mhm.
island we were on. And we were way at the bottom of that, down where we have a small Muslim minority in the Philippines, and they're concentrated primarily right around where we were.
Hmm.
But also lots of nominal Roman Catholic people or people of no faith or animistic faith or things like that. And they were sent there by their agency to go plant churches. And so that was, I was a baby, and we headed out when I was 2 months old, and that was home from, as far as I could remember. So I grew up in a really cool neighborhood. Most of my friends were Muslims,
Hmm.
and then we helped worked with Filipino partners to plant two churches in that city, and it was a really exciting time in the Filipino church. I think it was when the evangelical movement really was taking root and lives were being changed, transformed. And so in the middle of that, it was not hard to become a Christian. As a kid, the church was an exciting place for me. Definitely sometimes boring as a young person, but I found that to be like a welcoming, exciting place, and that was where my faith was really first formed. Um, Spent some time in the U.S. kind of on back and forth things as missionaries do, and especially back then. And so that was also formative to my faith, kind of interacting with some American churches, some of which were healthy, some of which were not that healthy, and that was also illuminating. But in all of that, I felt drawn to, you know, what's the best way to invest my time, my energy, and it's to know God, to understand Him. My dad introduced me to the book Knowing God by J.I. Packer when I was in eighth grade, which
Wow.
was a bit early, uh, but
Yeah.
uh, but it really, I mean, I'm sure I missed like 80% of it, but it really actually hooked me on the task of theology,
Huh.
and I just got interested in it. Went to college in the U.S. And stumbled into a Greek class with a fantastic Greek teacher named Scott Hafeman. He's a New Testament scholar, Paul scholar, but he was teaching introductory Greek and just caught me. And so I decided that was my way in to kind of study theology, study the Bible a lot in the original languages. Loved that. Wanted to do more kind of synthetic things, so I started getting into theology, which allows you to kind of look at the Bible, but also, let's say, culture or church history, things like that. And I met a few other mentors. Dan Trier at Wheaton really also gave me a vision for a theology that's deeply rooted in Scripture, but also engaging culture and things like that. And just fell in love with that. So ended up doing a PhD, and the day after I graduated, we flew back to Manila, where in the meantime we'd been engaging in discernment process, and we felt the Lord calling us here. My wife also, I met my wife in high school here, so she's also like me, a missionary kid
Oh,
who now is living in the Philippines as well. So
how many
yeah,
languages do you speak? I mean, do you speak Tagalog? I'm pretty sure.
I speak Tagalog fine. I grew up speaking Cebuano, but I
Okay.
think I've that's the language of the southern Philippines and eastern Philippines. And I still, I mean, I'm okay. I can understand it. I'm not fluent in it anymore at all. Um, I was an introverted kid, and that didn't help. In terms of for language learning, you want to be like really extroverted and like
Mm.
unembarrassed to make mistakes. Yeah, and then I've studied the normal ones in grad school: Greek, Hebrew, Latin, German, but I don't speak any of those. So
I love how you said that, just the normal ones, as if that's what everybody takes. I know I could barely get through Spanish. You're like, yeah, I took German, and I mean, oh my gosh, you language guys. I have a guy that was coming to my church. He was from Congo, and he was a refugee. And as we'd have people come to the church, and we thought he spoke 3 or 4 languages. But every time we would have someone come in, and people wouldn't understand him, and he would walk over and then speak to them in that language, and we'd start counting him up. The guy spoke 9 languages, and he
yeah,
didn't even
yeah,
know he spoke
yeah,
five nine
no,
languages.
yeah, yeah.
That's a
Yeah, no,
gift.
I mean, I have huge respect for my colleagues and students who are often operating in English as maybe their fifth, sixth,
Oh
and
my
they're operating at
gosh.
such a high level. It's impressive. So I definitely I would say I'm below average, at least in my world, linguistically.